So yeah, any questions? Yesterday I think we saw about when we we started looking at what is this web.xml file deployment descriptor. First was the concept of a web application. There's a structure to the web application, a folder which is needed. Right? Yeah. So any questions? Yeah.
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think, and all of you could access the GitLab repository. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll do one thing. I have added some. Okay. Okay. Anyway, I've added something now. I'll show what it is. Okay. Yesterday, I think while looking at related to the HTTP protocol, right? I think I made a connection using Telnet, right? Just to see how the headers appear in the response side. Okay, just a sample example for looking at the format of a response. Okay, fine. What actually I have is I located one of the code which was there earlier. Okay, this can be used as a dummy server. Fine, I'll explain the concept about this particular application. What is the whole idea here? Okay, I call it as a dummy server. The idea being, and okay, here the idea of this application here is that it can be used. Basically, the idea was that I want to explore any protocol which is text-based protocol, okay, based on which uses text, and I want to explore the protocol, how it is working. Okay, fine. So normally, if you have any kind of a server which is running, and it would run on some port number, so there'll be some address to it, there'll be some host where it is running. So the idea of this application here is that on a machine here, fine, on our machine here, we can start a server which is a dummy server, fine, which will be a dummy server. Okay, it's a dummy server for some existing server. So you decide on some particular. In our case here, fine. For our case here, we want to see how the we want to see about the HTTP protocol. Fine. So we understand it will be some kind of a web server for which we would like to create a dummy server. Okay. Fine. So so you have actual server here. Okay. Here is an actual server. Fine. So there is some actual server. Maybe this server is for the you have that Gujarat University AC.in, right? So yeah, it could be your server for that. Yeah. Okay, fine. What are the so we have that it's a dummy server for this, and we understand this this server is running on port number 80. Okay, so here this dummy server, when we start, it's again a server. Okay, fine, but it is acting as a server which will be in between the actual server. Okay, so you have your client here. Here is a browser, and the browser will not directly connect to the Gujarat University server, but it will say, okay, I would like to connect to this particular server. And whenever someone connects to this server, what it should do, it's a dummy server for Gujarat University. Fine. So this will say, okay, I'll connect to Gujarat University. So whatever request which you will send, I'll send it here. Whatever response which I get, I'll send it back to you. Okay, so while doing this, this can create a log of what is received from the client side and what is going from the what it has received from the server side. Fine. So this is how you can do. But yes, in the browser you will not be connecting to the Gujarat University server, but you will be connecting to this dummy server. Okay. So this is the code for that. Okay. Fine. Okay. So it's like fine. I mean, have you written a server using socket server socket? No, I think socket server socket you haven't done, right? But anyway, I'll just explain the code. So I think initially I'll explain this. Anyone has questions? Yeah, I think if anyone has questions, I'll answer those things first, and then we can have a look at the things here. Okay, fine. Then let's look at the code for this dummy server, right? Okay. So here it's called dummy server 1. Okay. Let's see. And this one says, okay, it's simply having a main method where it creates a server socket. Okay. And from the command line, it will take the server socket is for a particular port number, right? So yeah, on which port it will listen. Okay, so first is the port on which this particular service dummy server is going to run. Okay, it's going to use a particular port number. Okay, and then it has a while true loop where as soon as someone connects, so here is a client socket, so ss.accept, that's waiting for a client to connect. Okay, this one is waiting for a client to connect. So if a client connects, a socket object is obtained. Fine, and then using this socket, fine, we create two threads basically. So when someone connects to this, okay, fine. So when someone connects to the dummy server, okay, so there is one socket connection which is with the fine, there is one socket connection with the client, and for the socket connection which it has with the client, it will have to open up a connection with the server. Okay, and for that, yes, what it is doing is it's creating a runnable object. Okay, new inout one. Okay, so there it creates a fine connection. Fine. So this will be used for creating connection to the other side. Let's see what is this inout1.java. These are very small files. Okay, just not large piece of code. It's a small piece of code, but yes, it does all this job. So here is input stream is given, output stream is given, and ID is given. So three things have to be given. ID is used here just to create a prompt. Okay, when we'll run this, yes, you should be able to see what is the idea of that ID. So in this case, for example, a connection which is what is coming from the, so there is one thread, okay, which is going to read from the request, anything which is coming from the client. Okay, and whatever comes from the client, it will have to be put to the output stream, which will write to the server. Okay, so print writer here, PW, is for writing to the server. Okay, this one additional file was used, which is the log writer. Okay, so we have created our own log writer. Okay, so this will log into a file. Okay, fine, whatever is being written in or out, whatever way, fine, it will be straight away logging into a file. So log writer is also there. So we have this. Okay, I'll show the code for log writer, but for that, yeah, what the run method is doing, this is what it is. Read a line. Okay, so whatever line you have read, just send it to the other side. So PW is writing to the server side. If it is from client, right, then it will write to the server side. and it will locally display with the help of prompt. So the prompt will be like, I'll say prompt equal to client or prompt equal to server. Prompt equal to client means this is what is coming from the client for me. Okay, fine. And then whatever along with the prompt, I'll just log everything into a file. Okay, and then read the next line. So keep on reading. Okay, that's fine. It's a loop till you get a end of file. Fine. So that is what this inout one.java is doing. Okay. Now, if you look at that, okay, one just a quick thing about the log writer is very simple. Okay, it is just using a reader and a print writer and a buffered reader. Okay, fine. And there's one writer. So these two are reader and writer, which are the reader and writer for to read and write from whatever the client is, client or the server, any side. When something which is done from, so from inout, here it is using a log writer. Okay. So inout has this, when the log writer was created, okay, it has given yeah. Yeah. Fine. Here, yeah, this is the one, right? So buffered reader and a print writer created, then log writer is created. This log writer is a from this, but creating the log writer object. I think log writer was created here in the dummy server itself. Yeah. Anyway, the purpose here is to understand what is the interaction between client and server and log it into a file. Okay, we'll run this and then check the code. Okay. Let's compile and run this code. Okay. And okay, fine, and you can see. So dummy server, inout, and log writer, three things have been compiled. Okay, let's run the code. Java -cp ../bin, and here in this code, yeah, we would like to start the dummy server 1. Okay. Dummy server 1, let us listen on a particular port which you want. So we can decide. Maybe you want to listen on 8080 here. Okay. Fine. So the dummy server will listen on this port. That means from the browser, when I want to connect to the dummy server, fine, I should be using port number 8080. And okay. Fine, that's correct. GujaratUniversity.ac.in.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's listening on, that's working on port 80. Okay, and so we start like this. Okay, I think Windows has this allow access. Yeah. Okay, fine. So this is where our server is running, and now what we do is we'll use our browser. Let me create one more copy of the browser. Open a new window. And I'll use localhost now. Okay, or you can even write the IP address :8080 /. Okay, so I'll use this. Let's see. You may not get back a response here. Proper response may not come here. Okay, that's fine. Okay, our purpose is not about getting a response here, okay, but let's see what happened on this side. So now what it is showing is, you can see what exactly happened. So as the browser connected, browser said, okay, get slash and HTTP 1.1, and these are the headers. Okay, this is what came. Client has given this guy. Okay, it's repeating the same thing, repeats twice. Okay, everything will be repeating because one is from the log writer basically. The other one is because of the log writer. Okay. Every line is repeating, but anyway, this if we look at the file which has been created, that will contain much better things. Okay, so what all the things client has sent, or this is what actually there's no response which has come at all from the server side. Maybe we should try a different one. Anyway, okay, let me use Control C probably. Okay, 1 second. We have the log writer dot log. Okay. Okay. So I mean the idea was this, that yeah, we should be able to save it into a file. Anyway, it's only the client side which we have seen. Let me try a different dummy server now. We'll try for some other site instead of gujaratuniversity.ac.in. Let's try something else. Okay, we had done google.com yesterday. Let's try again. Okay. The response was 304 or yeah 301, I think, moved. Okay, so here we will be still using that same thing, 8080. No, the response is not coming back. Okay. Okay, I'm not, we're not debugging this code at this moment. Anyway, we can. Okay, fine. So yesterday we had seen the server side headers. Okay, so this one is just showing you the client side headers, what the browser has sent. And I'll open the file, log file. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you can see what it's all. First line is, see this part you will have to ignore everywhere because that's just to indicate that it has come from the client. Because in the same file I was actually, we want to have the entire interaction being logged into this. Okay, so what client has done and then what the server has done. Okay, that's what we wanted. But anyway, we'll see. So when you understand all the this all is nothing but information more about the, see here was, I think, yeah, agent, user agent. I was mentioning agent, this it's called user agent, and this is what is identity of the browser. Okay, so browser will send its identity. Yes, it's going to accept text HTML. Okay, what are things it accepts? Okay, which is the language preference. I was writing local, it's accept language, and the encoding is this. yeah, which this is what it can accept. Okay, so browser is actually telling about its own capabilities and says, okay, don't disconnect, fine, this connection can be kept alive. Okay, and okay, yeah, okay. See, basically the problem has come because of this, because it's saying localhost 8080, okay, in the host colon header, okay, and because of this the server has not responded. Okay, looking at this header, the server may not have responded. Yeah, that may be the case. Okay. Yeah, it's the same thing repeating every day. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, this is the server side. We couldn't get the response from the server here, but anyway, and we'll see that later, I think. Okay. But this is just to show you that how the what are the headers which go from the client, from a browser, basically. Typical browser, how does it, what kind of headers it will put. We were, yesterday when I did using telnet, I used get and host colon. Only two headers I had used. Okay. After get, yeah, it was only one header, yeah, host. Anyway, we'll see that. And so I'll correct and see what was the problem, and maybe we can try running it one more time. Okay, and let's try something like this. Let's make this also as port 80. It might like to ask for permissions here. I'm not sure whether permission will be there for port 80. Okay, so both are on the same port. I can just say localhost. Okay, there's no response which comes. Okay, yeah. What probably we may have to do is in our code, somehow we'll have to manage that at least if there is a header called host, okay, because we are anyway going through all the lines. So only for that one case where the host is shown, we have to change it to, instead of localhost, we have to replace and then send it. Fine, and not other things we can send as it is, but host header will have to be updated. Yeah, this host colon is only localhost, right? So instead of localhost, it will have to be that the site for which this is a server. I think because of this, it's creating a problem. Okay, the host header. Okay, fine. See, let me tell you, like all of these servers, right? They keep on upgrading themselves. So earlier, probably they were not as secure as they are now. Okay, and therefore they were probably not checking this earlier. That yeah, the host header, and without checking the host header, they would just give back a response. So yeah, this is for that. So because of that, yes, because now it's doing a check, so we may have to update and just check that yes, if we are getting a host header, okay, it should be replaced. Will be one additional logic we'll have to add. Okay, and we'll see how to update it later. Okay, but the only point why I had done this was to give you an idea about the headers from the browser. Anyway, there are other tools. I think even in the browser itself, you might be able to see certain, there are certain add-ons in the browser which can show you all of this. Okay, fine. Now let's continue, right? Okay, we'll continue with the things which we are looking at yesterday. Okay. Yeah. Just one more correction I have to make. Yesterday, I think I was mentioning that is Tomcat 9 when it has changed to Jakarta. It's not from Tomcat 9, it is Tomcat 10 basically. And so we may be, so we can use Tomcat 9 also and still be using javax.servlet. Okay. I think I'll correct it in this notes itself. I've mentioned Tomcat. Yeah. Okay. And so Tomcat 9 and Tomcat 10. So from 10, it would become Jakarta. And if you are using Tomcat 10. Okay. Okay, fine. I think we can continue with what we were doing yesterday. That is the deployment descriptor. Fine. Structure we understand, right? Any questions on the structure of a web application? Right? Structure was? Okay, what we looked at yesterday was web application. Okay. Fine. Fine. For just taking as an example. Okay. Fine. And it would have a web.inf folder. Okay. And within web.inf, you will have a web.xml. Okay. And we were looking at the content of web.xml. Fine, a typical content. Fine. So let me pick up from what we have done yesterday. Okay, this I'll just copy. Okay, I've only shown the top level type here. Fine. So purpose, yeah, I think this we understand that context param. Now, if I want to include nodes in this, okay, okay. I think this is how we can add comment. Even for XML, this works. XML, in XML, how do you put a comment or no comments? XML. Yeah. Okay, let me just avoid. Those are actually comments for HTML, but not for XML. Okay, is this purpose clear? What we are trying, what's the purpose of context param? Because of the context param, right? Okay, in a servlet context object, fine, we will have the method called getInit parameter, and getInit parameter names which will allow us to read this, okay, from the deployment descriptor. So at runtime, we are going to read this, okay. The servlet entry here is just nothing but the Tomcat server, right, will be creating these objects, okay. Whatever servlet entries are there, for each of those entries, an object of the class whichever you have mentioned, that would be created, okay. In this case, it's a hello servlet whose object will be created. And we can have URL mapping, okay. Yeah, towards the end I was just mentioning this URL mapping. So it is this URL mapping because of which, okay, certain URLs will start working, okay. So request, this becomes a resource, okay. So resources will be created because of the entry called URL mapping, okay. So we can have multiple URL mappings for the same object. So I have one object called sorry, yeah, what have we done? Okay, yeah, okay. So we have the same servlet name, okay, but we will have a different URL pattern. We can have, okay. So instead of saying slash hello, maybe you would like to have slash welcome, okay. That could be another URL pattern. So this will be available even with the welcome. So even if you say slash welcome, it's the same object which will do the processing of my request. Okay, fine. Which object? Okay, the object whose name is hello. Okay, which is the object with the name hello? Oh, here is the servlet. Yeah, here is the servlet, right? So object of this class. So there'll be one object created, okay, and this object is going to be used when someone says slash hello or when someone says slash welcome, in both cases. Okay, fine. I'll add one more, a couple of URL patterns more. So we understand how we get a URL pattern. URL pattern is one format of URL pattern is where you will always say slash and some fixed name. There's another URL pattern, okay, which would be saying, okay, slash, maybe I'll make it lowercase, okay, slash star. So we can use a wildcard like this, okay, slash hello slash star. So what would happen in this case? And then you could be having whatever path after this. If it is having hello and any other, whatever else may be there, but it starts with a hello, okay. So it just says, okay, that my URL should start with a hello. That's it. Okay, and then there is a slash after that, and anything can be there. In all such cases, I'll use the same object to do the processing of my request. Okay, so your HTTP request will be processed, fine, when it is given to the, see all these HTTP requests, they will come to Tomcat. So within Tomcat, because the URL contains the application name, it will locate this web deployment descriptor. Within the deployment descriptor, it will look at the URL mapping. Okay, there is a URL mapping, and in this URL mapping, it has seen slash hello in the beginning, and therefore it will decide that this is the object to be used. Okay, fine. So the processing of the request will be done by this. This will process the request and then generate an output, and that output will be sent back to the client by the Tomcat. Okay, fine. Servlet is not sending back the response. Remember this. Servlet is only the Tomcat is what it's a Tomcat who is receiving the request from the client. It is Tomcat who is sending response to the client. Okay, Tomcat locates which servlet is to be used. It will ask the servlet to generate the output, and whatever output it generates, then the Tomcat will be taking that output and putting it to the client. Okay, fine. That is how it works basically. So Servlet is not doing anything. Servlet is just one component used by Tomcat, used by a servlet container or web container, you can say. Okay, so fine. So this is where we use okay, /* right? Yeah, it is a path. Initial path is known. Okay, so that can be one form of URL pattern. Another form of URL pattern. So I'll use one more example for a URL pattern. Okay, this is where it is based on extension. Okay, maybe I'll still keep the same object, or you want to change the object, you can change. Okay, so in this case, you don't start with a slash, but you start with a star. So you can say star.hello, something like this. So if there is anyone, right, any request which comes, right, where, you know, we normally put some kind of a file name, we understand that. Oh, the name of the file ends with the extension of .hello. Oh, if there is a request for something .hello, oh, this is the object to be used. That's how it understands. So this is an extension based. So this will have /host/app, and then here could be anything. Okay, this could be anything. Any path could have been there. Okay, fine. But it says hello. Yeah. .hello. That's it. It ends with .hello. That's it. So it's this we call as an extension based pattern. Okay, this is extension pattern. Okay, so three forms of URL pattern, right? One is where we have a fixed one. Another one will be where we use a initial path. So initial path is fixed. Okay, and star is the wildcard. Okay, and this one, okay, the third one is where we use a extension dot something. Okay, star dot. So it would always have star dot and then something. Okay, so this is the extension based pattern. Fine. Okay, I think you would like to see it practically work. Okay, fine. To see this practically happen, I think I'll have to install Tomcat on this machine. I'll show you how Tomcat may be installed. One of the various ways you can install it. One is you will be, you can, there's one setup which is available for Windows machine. Okay, so if you run the setup, it will be there. It will become a service in the Windows. Okay, so I'm not going to follow that procedure. Okay, I'm going to follow a procedure where it is there is a zip file which is available. Okay, so we've got a zip file. I'll just okay, I'll just here. Fine. You can see there is this Apache Tomcat 9.0.54.zip, right? Okay, this is what I have downloaded. Fine, for Apache 9. Tomcat 9, sorry. Fine. So Tomcat 9, what I'll do now is unzip. How do you unzip? As a Java programmer, you know this jar tool? Okay. So we'll use this. Okay. Fine. So suppose you don't have the zip utility. Fine. You can still use always, but you have installed the JDK. If you have installed JDK, you'll have the jar command available. So we have jar -xvf. Okay. There it is. Okay. Fine. So there is this folder called Apache Tomcat 9.0.54. Okay. And I think I'll move this and rename it as, okay, rename Apache this as, and just simplify the name and just make it Tomcat 9. Okay, fine. Let's change the directory to Tomcat 9. Okay. Now, if you want to start Tomcat, Okay, you will see these are all the various files we get when we install Tomcat. Fine, when we extract that zip file. Okay, so one is the conf folder where configuration related things are available. Okay, here two files may be useful to you. Okay, one will be the tomcat users.xml and other is the server.xml. You want to change the port number. I was mentioning about that port number. By default it starts on port number 8080. That port number is what is configured in server.xml. Okay, and okay, what this tomcat users.xml is for, right? So that would be for what are the valid users of tomcat in the sense that when we start tomcat. Okay, yeah, one more thing. Let's check this folder called web apps, right? You see in web apps folder, what do we have? We have these applications already. There's some application called root. There's an application called manager. Okay, this is the one which is used for managing the Tomcat applications. So this is the place from where you can, you would like to restart a particular web application or do any such things. Even deploying a new web application, that can be done from here. Okay, so this is already an application, and for anyone who is using these applications, host manager, okay, these applications, for them there is this valid user who has to be fine. There has to be a user. So this valid user and his credentials, all that is configured using tomcat users.xml. Fine. We'll go through these tomcat users.xml. Maybe we'll configure that. But before that, yeah, we'll first have to start Tomcat. Yeah, okay. Before we, okay, so I'll just show where to start Tomcat from. So go to the bin directory, and here is a file called startup.batch file. Okay, so you can run the startup batch file, and it will start running the Tomcat. But it will be according to that particular configuration. Okay, let's start it once. And so this is for startup, and same way there is one for shutdown. And so this is what you should be doing for starting and stopping Tomcat. Okay, so if I say just startup, okay. So Java home environment variable is not set, right? Okay, so you can set. And just see the path here. As far as path is concerned, okay, the path is program files common Oracle Java path. Better would be program files Java JDK 19 bin, JDK 19. Okay. Okay, so you can just set Java home. It's an environment variable. I'm setting it just currently on this command prompt. Okay, but what you could do if you are going to use Tomcat regularly, okay, you could set these command environment variables from control panel. Okay, and okay. And so just don't include the bin. It's not the path we are setting. We are saying where is the JDK install. So I'm pointing into JDK 21. Okay, so Java home variable should be set to indicate where is your Java folder and not about the bin folder. Okay, don't include the bin folder here. So this is one of the things which you'll have to set. And earlier versions used to ask you to even set up a Catalina home, which I think now is not necessary. Let's do a startup again. Let's see. Okay. program files, I think that's a space and that's creating a problem, I think. Right, I think, yeah, that space is creating a problem here. And okay, let me try percentage 20 if it works like this. No. Okay. Including the space, I'm not sure how it is done. Okay, Windows, I think there's some, I'm not so familiar with the Windows environment, so anyone has idea? I'm interested in setting the environment variable Java home. So set is actually the command to set the variable, and since there's a space, I was including double quotes, but it's not working because from here it's breaking, and then this is taken as one more part of that command. Let me try this. I'm not sure if it works with this.
Sorry, actually you can try it by setting them manually.
Okay,
In
it's
the
done.
environment variable.
Yeah, it's working now. I had to include that set also within the set, and then entire thing in double quotes. Then it has worked.
Okay, sir.
Okay, fine. So here Tomcat has started, and by default it starts on port number 8080. Okay, fine. So it's now listening on port number 8080, and now what we can do is we can go to the browser. Okay, in the browser we can ask for localhost. Sorry. Okay, just 8080. You can do this, and so here it shows. And so this is okay, it has gone somewhere. It has gone to Google search. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so it has connected to this Tomcat 9. Fine. So this is okay. So from here, I was mentioning about an application called Manager. So this is that Manager app. Okay. Fine. So if you go to this Manager app, it asks for username and password. Fine. So what is the username? What is the password which we have to use? So this information will be in the Tomcat users.xml. So this is something which needs to be configured in Tomcat users.xml. Okay, fine. Okay, so let's see what is there in Tomcat users.xml. We'll update Tomcat users.xml, and then we should be able, then we'll have to restart Tomcat again. Okay, fine. So currently, yeah, the user is not configured to be able to access. Fine. Okay, we do have one user there. I'll show you what it is. But by default, what is there will not be able to access the. Okay, so we go to, this is Tomcat 9. Here's the conf folder and Tomcat users.xml. Okay, so you can see this, most of it is commented, and here it says Tomcat users. That's a top level tag, first tag. Okay, and and then yeah, it's all commented out. Yeah, okay, so all of it is commented, and so let's uncomment. Okay, I think before that here is that username admin. Okay, so we are uncommenting this. Okay, acha, robot, we don't want the robot user, so one second. Okay, fine, so we want one user called admin. Password is okay, it has said must be changed, so let's change it. Okay, this we can change to okay, for our case we'll just make it admin again, right? Simple. Okay, important thing here is roles manager GUI. This is what is needed. Okay, and for this role to work, okay, we have another line here which is for the role names. So we have to enable in the role name manager GUI. Yeah, we'll have to make an entry here. Okay. The idea here is that role entry is there to indicate what are all the valid roles. Okay. Fine. So now we can work. Yeah. There's this user, and he is given what are the roles he has. So he's got one role called manager GUI, and yeah, this is in the list of roles. So you need to ensure that there is a role entry for whatever role you are mentioning. Okay, so this is manager GUI role is what is needed for that particular manager application. Okay, fine. We'll save this file, and now we can. Okay, so here is Tomcat. Here is the command prompt. Okay, we have done the startup patch. Now we'll do a shutdown. Okay. Yeah. Fine. So Tomcat has closed. It seems it has closed or not. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So Tomcat has closed, and now we can restart again. Okay. This is running. Okay. This is the command. Okay, I think yeah. This we'll have to do it. Okay, let's try now. Okay, fine. So this admin is the password which I have used because that's how I have configured currently. Okay, so here you can see what are all the applications which have been deployed. Okay, so we want that application called academic to be available here, right? Fine. See that slash which you are seeing here, first path is slash. That is for the application by the name root, all capital letters. Okay, so this is this application basically manager is, this is the place from where you can actually stop, start and reload a particular any application which is running. So any of the application can be started or stopped from here. Okay, host manager, manager, examples and docs, these were, you know, within the web apps, these are all the directories which we had seen. So if we add one more directory and we can fine, if we just add one more directory and restart Tomcat, maybe fine, I'll do restarting of Tomcat. Okay, the other ways we could have done it, but I'm currently going to do a restart for Tomcat. Okay, from command. Okay, this is command backslash web app. Right, this is the place, right? These are the applications we are seeing. One is the slash, other is manager, host manager, examples and docs. Okay, let's create a directory called academic. Okay, and or okay, let's make a directory within academic called webinf. Okay, now we can have our one second. Okay, let's create a web XML file and we'll just give web app. Okay, and this I think better to copy what we have written earlier, right? Okay, I will copy from here. Okay, yeah, context params will keep as it is. Servlet, we haven't yet defined a servlet. Okay, so this is what all things we will be actually removing. Okay, we'll add them later. Okay, once we write the servlet, then we'll be able to add them and use them. Okay, fine, but just this much only, right? Okay, description, yeah, we need, if you want we can have some description. Okay, where do we save it? Where should it be saved? In Tomcat, we have the web apps folder. Okay, and then we have our application folder as academic, within which we have the webinf. This is the place for deployment descriptor. Fine, this is your web.xml file. Fine, clear? Our application is the name academic. Okay, yeah. And now we'll, okay, let's start. Okay, we'll go through the startup and shutdown only again. Achha, it's not here. Okay, I'm just going to start again. Okay, now let's go back to this manager. Yeah, here. Okay. Let's reload this page. Okay, fine, we can find academic, right? Here, academic section. You can see this is what is the display name. Fine. So the web.xml is what is read by the Tomcat, fine, and it is managing them. Okay. Fine, here you can do stop this application, start application, all that can be done. Okay, we haven't done any kind of a URL yet. Okay, we haven't. So if you keep any static page, any HTML pages, you can keep them, but they shouldn't be inside the web.inf folder. Outside the web.inf, anything whatever is there, that can always be accessed. And how they'll be accessed? How will you access it? Yeah, if you have any, okay, let me keep a file there. Okay, maybe it's not even a HTML file, then also fine. Then any kind of file can be there. So let's see. Okay. Okay, let's copy. And okay, it's within EJT only, right? So from, I think we have the SRC here. Yeah. Okay, and any file here, maybe dummy server.java. Let me copy it here. Okay, so it's even a Java file. Let's check this, whether we can see the Java file from there. Okay. Basically, it's normally used to serve a HTML file. Okay. Okay. Fine. So web application, how do we access them? Localhost. Okay. Port number. What's the application? Slash then application. What's the application? Slash. Okay. Let's see. Oh, see, because it can't, it doesn't know how to render. The browser doesn't know how to handle a Java file, and therefore it's asking you to save it. Okay, so this is what can happen anyway. So if it was a HTML file, it would have actually shown it here. Okay, since that one is not a HTML, yeah, we are not able to see it. Fine. So the whole point is that all your static content is going to be directly under your application folder. Okay, and let's just try another thing. Let's try to see the okay, so this is .java. Let's try, see this, just testing it. Okay, so someone thinks, okay, let's try to look at what is there in the web.inf. Slash, and we have the web.xml here, right? And you can see, so that would be 404. Yeah, it's there, right? And under academic, we do have the folder called web.inf, and that contains a web.xml. Okay, but that's not going to be available. It's a 404. WebINF, immediately, yes, this is a private folder, you can't access. So that would always turn out to be 404. Okay. Okay, now, fine. So any questions? Yeah. See, starting Tomcat was just like, okay, if you download the zip file, extract it, fine. You need to configure Java home environment variable to point to a valid Java JDK installation, fine, the folder where JDK has been installed. And then you just do a startup from the bin folder. Okay, once you do a startup, yes, it would start. Configuration related things are there in the conf folder, CONF. Fine. So this is how Tomcat can be managed. Okay, applications in Tomcat. Oh, we manage one application in Tomcat, right? Right. Academic is one application we have managed within Tomcat. Okay, there were the other applications where some of the ready-made applications were there. Okay, fine. And one of the applications is the manager application, which allows us to manage and see what all applications are running in and other things. Okay. Okay. Now coming to the okay, continuing with this deployment. Yeah, yesterday one of the things I think which we started with was what happens when Tomcat is started. Yeah. So what exactly happens? We are seeing what is happening is it's reading this folder, right? It's seeing, oh, what are all the applications which have been deployed. And then yesterday what I was mentioning, I'll come back to that point again. Okay, that when Tomcat finds for each of these applications which have been deployed, it creates an object. Okay, so in the virtual machine, the Java virtual machine for the Tomcat, fine, Tomcat is actually a Java application, so it's running a Java application. So within this application, there are objects of type servlet context. So one servlet context represents one web application. So for every web application, there is a servlet context object which is created. Okay, fine. And whatever we have got in the web.xml file will be available through the servlet context. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, what exactly happens here is something like this. Now, okay. So one thing, what it has created is one object, right? I said, okay, it is creating an object of, this is an object of the servlet context. Okay, fine. This is, so one servlet context corresponds to one XML file, web.xml file. Now within this web XML file, it sees that there are these servlet entries. Fine, it comes across the servlet entries. Each servlet entry is indicating a class name, okay, and a name by which it has to remember the object. So it has to create. So now what it does, no, it doesn't straight away create the servlet object. Okay, you may find, okay, oh, there is this servlet entry, so a servlet object must be created, right? Okay, let's see this in the, this is, I'm coming to the notes part here. Let's start. Okay, fine. For each web application, there is a deployment descriptor. Okay. Okay. In web.xml file, okay, for it will look for servlet entry, servlet tag. For each servlet tag, okay, it will create an object of servlet config. We'll see what is this. So first I'm just listing what are the various kinds of object it needs to be creating. One object I have mentioned is servlet context, that was mentioned yesterday. Another object now which is coming into picture is the servlet config object. Right? So for each servlet tag, so one servlet tag, I have to have a servlet config object. Okay. Right? For each servlet tag, a servlet config object is created. And this would be created first, then the corresponding servlet object is created. So when I say servlet object, it means okay. So whatever is the class which is mentioned in the servlet tag, that will be the one which will be used. Okay. Okay. And it will do this. Okay. And it will initialize the servlet. Okay. Okay, so now it is talking about fine. So now we are saying, okay, we have one object of servlet context. So first, I'll just list them. So first is the object of servlet context. Next one is the object of servlet config, and third one is the object of the servlet itself. These three are interfaces. Okay, these two objects are the objects which are created by Tomcat itself. Okay, the classes for them, you don't have to worry about which is the class which is implementing the servlet context. You don't have to worry about which is the class which implements the servlet config. Okay, but what as a programmer, as a developer, what you are doing is you're only developing servlet. Okay, we have servlet as an interface, and you need to write. Okay, fine. We need to write class which implements the servlet interface. Okay. Okay. Fine. So there is a specific manner in which all these objects are used basically. Okay. And so what Tomcat is going to do, though I am using the term Tomcat here, it means it's not only Tomcat, any other web container. Okay, any other web container. So it not necessarily Tomcat. These could be other Java-based web servers. Okay, any Java-based web server. Tomcat is just one implementation. Okay, fine. So for all of them, it's like this. They all follow the same structure. Okay, fine. So okay. So let's see what is fine. So let's see what are the methods in the servlet interface. Okay. Okay. So methods, right? Methods in So servlet has got 5 methods. First method, yeah, this would be, so some of these methods, there are 3 methods in this out of these 5, which are the methods which we call as the life cycle methods. Okay, so first one, right? So public method returns void, method name is init, has a parameter, the type is servlet config. So this is the first method. Okay, and these are methods of interface, so they are all abstract, obviously. Okay, there's another method. So I'm now putting the first lifecycle methods. Method return void, name of the method is service, and it takes as parameter a servlet. So now there are more kind of other kinds of objects which also come into picture. Okay, so we have init, service, destroy, and there are 2 more. One of them is the method to return the servlet config. And there is one more, which is more from the documentation point of view, or rather, I should say. Okay, there's still one more, but that's not a significant one. Okay, and yeah, something to talk about the documentation basically. This method returns a string. It's a get method. Get servlet description. It's not description, it's something else. Okay, I'll come to this method. Fine. So anyway, so 5 methods in the servlet interface. Okay, let us see what exactly I was mentioning, that these 3 are the lifecycle methods and how they are the lifecycle methods. Let's check this part. Okay, so first, what was the first thing it did? Created. First is creation of okay, fine. First is creation of servlet context. Second, creation of servlet config. This is for each application. This is for each servlet entry or each servlet tag in web.xml. Okay, now for each servlet tag in the web.xml, third thing, okay, servlet. Whatever, when I'm saying servlet here, I mean the class, whichever class you have mentioned, which is implementing this interface. Okay. Okay. Fourth, so what is this fourth? I'm saying, okay, initialization of servlet. So for that, what it is doing is, it's this step here, fine, is nothing but the object which it has just created, the servlet object which it has created, fine. Okay, so it's about invoking the init method. Fine. The servlet object which is created in the third step, fine. Yeah, that one, on that it has to invoke the method called init. For invoking the init method, what was necessary? Servlet config was necessary. Okay, fine. Let's see. Okay, and now also list methods of servlet config. So what is there in servlet config? Okay, see, this servlet config corresponds to a servlet tag, right? Okay, so I'll just copy the servlet tag over here, a sample servlet tag, so we can, okay. Okay, there are more things which can go in a servlet tag, and just copy it here. So it has a method called get servlet name. Okay, it has a method to return the servlet context object. Okay, get servlet context. Okay, and okay, now I'm adding few more things into this. Just like you had the context param appearing within a web app, right? That was at the application level. That was something which was picked for the servlet context object. Same way, the servlet config uses init param. This has the param name. Okay, and that could be anything, fine. Okay, so this one is a servlet class which says hello, right? So param name is greeting. And this. So how it should greet? Okay, I would like to use this word for greeting. Okay, instead of saying hello, I would like to use this. So maybe you don't want to hard code, fine, how it should be. So we normally say hello world. So instead of this, yeah, it would be using this instead of hello. No hard coding of hello. Okay, fine. So so this is something where you would like to have parameter which are read by your servlet. Okay, your servlet code should be able to read this. What is when you are deploying this servlet, you are saying, okay, for this servlet, the name of the greeting is, or greeting value, right, is going to be, or yeah, this is going to be called as namaste. Okay, this is fine. Okay, so what we have here is we even have method called public method returns string get init parameter, and that would take as parameter string for the parameter name. Okay, so these are the kind of methods which we have in the servlet config. So servlet config has methods like this. Fine, the whole point is servlet config is based on servlet tag. Information found within the servlet tag is what would be part of the servlet config object. Okay, and then it is using your servlet class, creating an object of this, and the first thing what it did was initialization. Yeah, look at the initialization. Look at the initialization. What it is doing? Invoking the init method. Okay. So understand the whole process now. Okay. When I put, okay, there are a couple of objects still which need a little of explanation to understand the whole process. Okay. How a request gets processed. This first part, what I'm showing here is related to the initialization part. This is initialization. Reading the deployment descriptor and calling the initialization. Okay, and then just waiting. Fine. See, this is a server, right? Tomcat is just simply a server. Okay, let's go through the whole process again. Okay, so it created a servlet context object corresponding to the application called academic. What it has done, it has read the context param, that information is available. Okay, it has read the display name, and that so we have this method. Servlet context has this method called get display name. It has the method called get init parameter. But init parameter means it's reading the context parameters. Okay, and so it has read and it has created this object to make all that information available. Fine. Next, it sees the servlet entries and says, fine, let's create a servlet config object. Fine. In the servlet config, it says your name is hello. Right? It says, okay, this is called hello. Okay. Servlet class is not a method which is to be known here. Okay. And servlet class is not a method which is to be known here. But there is, these are all appearing for a particular web application. So this object is also told that here is the application. This is your servlet context object. Right? Servlet config will know the servlet context because that has been created first. Servlet context is created. So one servlet context, multiple servlet entries. Maybe there are two servlet entries, one for hello, other for hi. Okay, fine. And they both refer to the same servlet context. They have their own init parameters. They have their own names. Fine. So all that information is what. So this is information. Servlet context and servlet config are information from the web.xml file, picked up from the web.xml file. Okay. Next, it says for every servlet config, there has to be a servlet object. So here it creates your object of a class which is implementing the servlet interface. Those 5 methods are there. Fine. So create one object, and on that object, invoke the method init. So through init, what is being done? The corresponding servlet config object is made available with the init method. So normally, what is the implementation supposed to do? What should it be doing? A typical servlet implementation, if someone has to implement this servlet interface, methods of servlet, where are those? Yeah. Okay, fine. You would like to implement the servlet interface. How would you implement the servlet interface? Public implements and in this, yeah, we need those 5 methods. Okay, sorry. Fine. Each one will have to write the implementation. Yeah. So what should be done if someone gives me a servlet config? Now you understand there is one more method which says you also need to implement this method also, right? So what do you think? How will you do this? You want to implement this also. The most natural thing would be to have a private variable. The type would be servlet config. Okay, let's call it maybe config. And here, what I need to do is this dot config is equal to config. And here I can just say return this dot config. See, I'm showing you the whole process, what's happening. Okay. Yeah. So if someone wants to write an implementation of the servlet interface, this is what he's supposed to do. Initialization will give him the servlet config. Why the servlet config is made available? Because through the servlet config, he can access the servlet object, fine, which is your implementation. See, you are not implementing servlet config nor the servlet context, but you are writing implementation of servlet. So this is the component from the application developer. The servlet config and servlet context, those are the components from the web application, the web container, basically web container, your Tomcat. So the one who has written Tomcat, he has written the implementation for them. But those objects will be available so that you can interact with Tomcat. Okay, you can interact with Tomcat to find out, oh, what was given in the deployment descriptor. Okay, because that's what is the configuration. And you would like to use all that, right? So for that reason, right, this is okay. So a servlet tag, there is a servlet config. Okay, and so you want to read what should be the welcome and other things. Let's see this now. Okay, so this is your initial implementation. Fine, I have just written implementation for the init and the get servlet config method, two methods. Okay. And then the service method. Okay. Now, so what? Fine. So the whole process is like this, right? First, second, third, and fourth step should be fine. Okay. And once this initialization is done, then what's happening as far as Tomcat is concerned? After having read the whole configuration and having initialized all the servlet, then we say the startup of my Tomcat is completed. Okay, the startup for Tomcat is completed. It's a server. Now it is going to wait. So after this is done, these four steps are done. Tomcat starts waiting. Now it's waiting for a client. Some browser has to come and connect to it. So when a browser will come and connect, okay, some client connects, not only browser, any kind of a web client. If it connects to the server, to the Tomcat server, fine. In that case, the Tomcat server will then see what is there, what is the request which has come. Okay. Fine. Here is the this is, you can think, is the hello servlet which has been created. Okay. Now what will happen at runtime? What will happen? Here is a browser. Okay. Fine. He is making a connection to the server and sending a GET request. We know this. Right? He is sending a GET request. Right? So in the GET request, if he has said /academic / something, whatever it may be, right? Because it has identified it as /academic, it has to use this servlet context. It knows it has to use this servlet context. Fine. See, the initialization part is over. It will look at which servlet entry it is by because of the URL pattern and the mapping, which URL servlet mapping. Because of the servlet mapping, and it's able to identify that a particular URL should use this particular servlet. Okay, that is fine. But one thing now, what happens because of whatever connection he has done, what is also being done now, this is done each time a request is coming. Initialization was one thing, startup. When Tomcat starts up, it has created those initial objects. But at runtime, each time a client connects, and for every time a client connects, it needs one object, which is an object of servlet request. It also creates one more object. So two objects are getting created. One is an object of servlet request, other is an object of servlet response. And create these two objects. what is the servlet request object? You have seen the request, the headers, okay? It will say, oh, this request is having a method which is the get method or post method or what kind of method it is. So one Java object is created out of the the text which was received from the client by Tomcat. Fine, we understand it's a HTTP protocol, and in HTTP protocol it has to send one request line followed by headers. Okay, many of those headers have a lot of meaning associated with them. So from according to that, it is actually creating the object of servlet request. So servlet request has all the information, all the headers and every information about the client, whatever is possible from the request which it has received. So it is keeping all this information in a servlet request object. So that is what is being done. And so creation of a servlet request object. Also, since it knows it has to give back a response, it is creating a blank buffer, okay, putting the buffer inside an object of servlet response. So there is a servlet response object which contains an empty buffer. Okay, it contains this empty buffer, and then it has located that this is my servlet, right? This is my servlet, okay, which is identified that this is the one which will do the processing. So now it will invoke, right? So now having created these two, it will now invoke a method and pass both of these as a parameter. So there is this method called service. Service method is where these two objects are given to the servlet. So your servlet's service method should be able to read information about the request which has come. If I want to read the headers, we have all the methods in the servlet request object. So servlet request is another interface. Servlet response is also another interface. So we have methods which are for reading information related to the request, the HTTP request which has arrived. Fine. So you read that, do your processing here, whatever processing you want to do your processing. But at the end of processing, what you need to do is, I have also given you a servlet response object. Please fill this buffer for me. So this one will write into the buffer. So the job of the servlet, fine, the job of the servlet is to fill the response object. Okay, once the response object is over and the service method finishes, this response will be sent back to the client. Okay. Sending it back to the client is the responsibility of the container. So container's job, clear? Fine. See, first initialization for the container would be identify all the web applications which are deployed, create a servlet context object for them. Okay, for each of the web application, there is a deployment descriptor. Fine. Look at the servlet entries, servlet tag which is there. Pick up the servlet entries. Fine. Create servlet config object for each of the servlet tag. So how many servlet? Oh, so many servlet config objects. And for each servlet config, also create the servlet object. This is the object. See, this object is of a class which is known to the container. This object is of the class which you have mentioned in the deployment descriptor. That's your servlet. So this is the application developer's object. Other objects are object of these are objects which are managed by container. And even your object, you are not never saying new and creating new hello servlet. No, you are not saying new hello servlet. It has to be created by the Tomcat. Fine. When I'm saying Tomcat, it means the web container. Okay. Fine. So life cycle is like this, right? First life cycle, initialization. So that's the first life cycle method is init. Second life cycle method is regular invocation of service. When it is invoking service, whenever a request arrives, it has to create these objects, request object and response object, and invoke the service method. Service method has two parameters. Right? Those two parameters, right? One for request, other is response. Response is a blank. Response just contains a blank buffer. We will see what all we will have to look at what are the methods available in request so that you understand how to analyze the request which has arrived. You'll also have to look at the methods which are part of the servlet response so that you know how to fill the buffer properly. Okay, so that you will find so that the container can give the proper response back to the client. Okay, so mainly it is the service method which is, so it's a service method which is responsible for setting up the response which goes. It is receiving the request, all the information from the request, and it is putting back the response to the client. Okay, so request response, those two are the important interfaces. Fine, those are provided as interfaces, right? And so we need to know them. Okay, and okay, now yeah, so I said there are three lifecycle methods. First is init, second is service. This is the regular one. Okay, and then we have a third lifecycle method, and that's a method called destroy with no parameters. Okay, so the destroy method, when will it be called? It will be called on the servlet object to indicate that you are no longer going to be in service. Okay, fine. See, for example, we saw that manager application, right? In the manager, someone says, no, let me stop this application. So when you say, I want to stop the web application, right? It would invoke this destroy method on all the servlet objects which are part of that web application. And saying, okay, now you're going to be out of service. And so destroy means, okay, after this, no more servicing of request is going to be done. Okay, maybe someone does like this, that when initialization is done, I'll make us okay, is this clear, the whole process, how the request gets processed? See, if before the request processing can begin, we need some initialization. Okay, what is the initialization which is done? First part, it's going to read the deployment descriptor and create an object of servlet context, right? So some application level parameter, for example, the parameters like so we saw that context parameters, fine. So those information will be set up here. Okay, fine. Okay, there are more things which you can do with the help of servlet context. See, one thing you can see here, the first method which is invoked on a servlet is to, okay, first was this. Then we have the servlet config object being created for every servlet entry. Okay, and then is this component, the component which is your servlet component, right? When the servlet is created, it is said, okay, here is a servlet config object. And through the servlet config object, even the servlet context is accessible from the servlet object. So servlet object, when I write the implementation, you can see the kind of implementation which I started to write. Okay, I'll just show here. Okay, so if someone is writing an implementation, we did something, right? So we did this, right? Okay, now someone has to write the service method. Okay, yeah, what should be the service method implementation? In this service method implementation, I'm responsible for using this response. I'm supposed to fill into this response. Response is actually a blank buffer. Okay, how to fill into the buffer, that I'm not putting, but currently just look at this, that here I have got this dot config. Okay, and I can say get servlet context. See, with this, what is available to me, I'm able to access my servlet, my service method is able to use the information which is there in deployment descriptor, right? Fine. I can use .get init parameter and I can know the JDBC URL, right? Those class name and in any such thing, any information which I have stored, configured in the deployment descriptor in the web XML file is accessible to me straight away. Okay, so when I'm using service method, I have this .config, right? Okay, this .config and this .config .get. So there are some methods here, right? For example, get servlet name, right? See, it is our servlet class. It doesn't know by what name it has been deployed, right? That servlet name is in the tag, right? It's not known to the servlet object. It will be known from the config if you want to use that information also for some purpose. Okay, fine. Okay, so various kinds of get methods here. Config.get, you will have request.get, so many things. So from the request you will need the headers, or you need to know anything else, get the method or which method it is, right? So all such information will be available. The whole point is this. Okay, so we have these objects available so that when you write your service method, you use them. Fine. You are going to interact with the servlet config and the servlet context. You'll be interacting with the servlet request to fetch information. You'll be interacting with the servlet response, that response object, right? Servlet response is the second parameter in this method, service method. So response dot, and there are okay, you want to fill into the buffer, you will be able to create a print stream. Okay, something like this. Yeah, not print stream, it will be a print writer basically. There's a method to get your print writer. Okay, and then out.println. So when you say out.println and you are putting some HTML over here, okay, fine. So when you write this code, it's actually putting it into a buffer. This is putting into a buffer. And when your service method will finish, invocation of service method will be invoked only when someone has sent a request which involves this particular servlet object. Okay, and how that identification is done? Because of the servlet mapping and a URL pattern which has been mentioned for the servlet mapping. Fine. Because of that, it identifies the object, and for that object, it is invoking service. Fine. And in the service method, okay, when it has invoked the service method, you are accessing a response object, right? In the response object, there's a print writer. You will be able to fill into the buffer of the response object by writing into the print writer. You don't have to do anything else. When just put into the print writer, and so this is where, you know, out.println, anything. So your title and all this, also things, right? You can put the body, and you can, you know, that H1 with hello world. Okay, plus, okay, after H1, maybe you would like to put the config.get init parameter, and I want to see the parameter by the name greeting. Okay, fine. And then I'll give a space, and then I'll use the yeah, I'll just use the word world. So what is the greeting you want to use? Or that can be, it's coming from the config file in the web.xml. Basically, it's coming from the config object. Okay, and this just, I'm giving a rough idea of what it is. Okay, what it is like, right? The kind of components getting created and purpose of each component. Okay, because you wanted to do you know, you wanted to do a JDBC, fine. You wanted to connect to a database. Maybe right in the init itself, you would like to connect to a database. Fine. How do you connect to the database? So you'll say, okay, in the init itself, maybe I'll keep some more variable here for the private. Okay, and we have that object of connection, right? In JDBC, we have that connection object. Right? Okay. And how do you initialize the connection? So for that, maybe you would like to do class.forName. Okay, what should be the class.forName? Config.get servlet context dot get init parameter. See, I'm picking up from the things which we had done yesterday. So in the get init parameter, I think yesterday we used a context param where we said param name as JDBC dot driver dot class or class name. I'm not sure what it was, but something on these lines. So you say, you want to do a class.forName once, right? So that would be in the init, and then you would like to use a URL and create a connection, driver manager. Okay, oh, you have that con already. Okay, and from the config again, right? So almost similar thing, but instead of the driver class, now you are looking for the URL. When you are looking for JDBC URL now. Yeah. Okay, this is not exact code, but I'm just giving a rough idea how the things are useful to us and the various components, how they are useful. Okay, and then you would like to use the destroy method for closing the connection. Okay, so destroy method, yes, if I have picked in init, I have got some connections which have been created. I've taken some resources. I need to release the resources. So that's what I should do in the destroy. Init, maybe I'll pick up some resources, fine, and destroy, I'll release them. Service, okay, request will come, I'll process the request, give a response to it. Okay, so that's why we have these three lifecycle methods. This is the idea behind the three lifecycle methods of a servlet. Right? So you should know the three lifecycle method of a servlet, and that's one thing. Okay, fine. So any questions? Yeah, we will be doing some exercise on this, and I'll demonstrate. But before I demonstrate, I'll have to show you the whole API also. Okay, fine. The entire API documentation for what is there in the servlet config, what is there in servlet context, fine, the purpose, what each one of them serves. But the relationship should be clear. In a container, we deploy various web applications. Fine. When we start Tomcat, for each deployed web application, a servlet context object gets created. Fine. For the servlet, for each web application which has been deployed, we have a web.xml file. Okay, the deployment descriptor. The deployment descriptor will contain several servlet entries. Right? For each servlet entry, a servlet config object is created, as well as the corresponding class object is also created. But before the class object can be created, the config object would be created. Fine. When the config object is created, it is given, the config object will have access to the servlet context. So one object of servlet context, multiple servlet config have reference to it. Fine. They all refer to the same servlet context object. Fine. And the servlet object, which the servlet class, whichever you have mentioned, the object of that class, when it is created, you would be having the init method being invoked on it, where the config object will be given to it. Fine. So the implementation class, when someone writes, must store that object, okay, so that it can access the configuration parameters. Okay, so that's one thing. So typically when someone writes a code, this is a must. Okay, having a private variable for the servlet config, and init method is supposed to set it up, and we are also supposed to have the implementation of get servlet config to return that object. Okay, so when someone says, oh, we have this interface to be implemented with those 5 methods, okay, I don't remember the name of that 5th method, but normally that 5th method is not much. It is, I think 4 methods we have seen, right? The 5th method still remains. Yeah, this one. The method name I have not mentioned, but anyway, let me tell you what it is supposed to do. It's supposed to return a string, and what it would return. For example, here in my case here, in our case here, what we can do is we can say return, and I'll just say copyright. Okay. You give a copyright message. That's it. Something like this. Okay. You can even give the name and include. So this is just a string. It's more from the documentation point of view, which is there. Okay, the method name I don't remember, but that method I'll find out and tell you. But the methods doesn't have much role basically. It's just to return. If someone invokes that method, he'll get a copyright message. He's supposed to get a copyright message like this. So I'll say, oh, this is a hello servlet copyright, and have a copyright for this. Okay, it's just returning a copyright message. Okay, not much. Fine. Clear idea on this? Any questions? Yeah.
So,
Huh.
you put the three dots after the get server method. Is there a compulsory or a
Which one? Get
the public string get server three dot.
3 dot is actually there is a method. I've forgotten the name. I remember it will be get servlet something something. Something something.
But I thought it was referred to something.
No. I don't remember the name. Okay.
Got it.
Okay. Fine. Okay, we'll check from the API. We'll see. But yeah. So there's some method. Fine. The name I don't remember. Okay. Yeah. So any questions? Yeah. It may have been a little heavy today, I think, right? So maybe we'll revise it again. Right? So
Okay, sir.
yeah. But I think you should ask when things get heavy. You can ask me to even stop. We can even, sometimes if you feel like taking a break after 1 hour, okay, 5-minute break or something, then you can ask that, right? So that can be okay. Okay. And yeah, and I think you now know how to, basically how to make Tomcat to work, how to get Tomcat working, and that by using a zip file. Even if it's not a service, see, I have used a zip file. If you are on Linux, okay, you will be using this zip file. Fine. On Linux, it will be this zip file that you will be using, and Yeah, there again, that configuration will be the environment variable called Java home. Okay. In old versions, even one more environment variable used to be configured that was known as Catalina home. So Java home and Catalina home, these two environment variables we would normally set up if you want to run Tomcat. Once they have been set up, so Catalina home would point to the directory where Tomcat has been installed. Okay, that's a normal case. Okay, so from there it knows, yes, so within by these variables it knows where to look for the web application. So it will locate the web apps folder when it starts up, create the objects. So basically it's all about Java objects being created. You see what is being done by Tomcat. Whenever a request comes, it's converting the information which comes in the form of a text into a Java object. What is servlet request? It's a Java object created from the HTTP protocol, right? From the HTTP protocol which we have, right? It has received some information which is in the form of a text, use it and put it into an object. And that is a servlet request object. Okay, and servlet response is simply a blank buffer. Initially, it's a blank buffer given to the service method. Service method is supposed to fill into the buffer. And how does it fill? By using a print writer. Or if it's a binary data, you can use an output stream also. Okay, you can set up your headers even through this. While giving response, you want to set up headers, they'll be available. Okay,